As the eyes of the world are fixed on the Ukraine, this country's longest-serving Member of Parliament says we mustn't lose sight of a crisis in our own region. According to Liberal MP and Spectator Australia columnist Kevin Andrews, Australia and New Zealand need to push back against Chinese aggression and so-called debt trap diplomacy in the Pacific. Kevin Andrews joins me now. Kevin, great to see you. How are you?
I'm well, Rowan. Happy New Year.
And to you, and happy Australia Day. Matt Canavan wants Australia Week, and I think we're all getting behind that. Let's get the Australia Week push going. Maybe it could be a public holiday. The whole week. Come on, Kevin, you can make that happen, can't you? Now, you make the point in your brilliant Spectator article this week that tsunami-ravaged Tonga is one of Beijing's biggest debtors. 2/3 of their debt is owned by China. There are other countries in the same boat. What can Australia do about this?
Well, first of all, we have to understand what's going on in the South Pacific, Rowan, where China is moving in with its debt diplomacy. As you say, Tonga is heavily indebted to China, and they've had to try and renegotiate their loans. What we've found in other places, in other countries around the world, where those loans get called in and China says, well, we want concessions. We want to be able to use your ports, build an airport, have somewhere which our military shipping and other shipping can go. So Tonga's one example. The Solomon Islands is a second one where there's quite a degree of civil unrest now. There are Chinese police on the Solomon Islands. In Fiji, we've had the current government courting the Chinese, something which is going to be a subject, I think, of considerable interest at this coming election this year in Fiji. And even closer to home, in the Papua New Guinea, there have been proposals to build a major fishing hub city and indeed other facilities on Daru Island, which is just a few kilometres north of Cape York. So throughout this area, Kiribati, another example where the Chinese are looking at putting in port facilities. In our own backyard, China's been moving in. So we have to be much more vigilant about this, and we have to ensure that we have good relations with our South Pacific neighbours and help them in such a way that we ensure that China just doesn't waltz into the area and take over the ability to control maritime and major trading lanes to the US and indeed throughout Asia and the Pacific itself.
Kevin, here in Australia, we've just received our new Chinese ambassador. He says he's committed to fostering a sound, steady Chinese-Australia relationship, which has spurred talk of some kind of diplomatic reset. The previous Chinese ambassador was a bit of a bad-tempered wolf warrior type. Are we seeing a genuine olive branch from his successor, or is this just more smoke and mirrors?
Well, two things, Rowan. First, I welcome his conciliatory approach. China gave a whole new meaning to diplomacy, which was, something which is normally conducted behind the scenes. Diplomats were seen but never heard. This wolf warrior approach has angered other nations right around the world, and we're not alone in relation to that. So I welcome the new approach. But as we say, actions are more important than words. And so I'd like to see some action from the Chinese in relation to their approach to Australia. Perhaps they could withdraw their 14 grievances against Australia, which included, such an absurd allegation that we have a free press in this country. Perhaps they could do something like adhering to the World Trade Organization rules and not go out of their way to, put bans on Australian produce. Not that we're the only country in that regard around the world. Even a small European country such as Lithuania has had bans placed on it by the Chinese in recent months. Perhaps they could abide by the international law in relation to the sea and not claim that somehow other nations shouldn't be able to use the South China and the East China Sea. Perhaps they could stop some of their human rights abuses against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province and against the Tibetans, and perhaps they could restore a little democracy to Hong Kong. These are just a few suggestions that I could make to His Excellency the new ambassador as to how he could actually fulfil that conciliatory approach which he's indicated at the outset on his arrival in Australia.
Kevin Andrews, I would love to see you sit down with the new Chinese ambassador, and maybe, who knows, he may be watching and taking notes right now, and I certainly hope he is. It's always great to read you, Kevin Andrews, in The Spectator Australia. Your insights are always extraordinary, and thank you so much for coming on Inside the News this evening. Thank you.
My pleasure.